workshops facilitated. This workshop is facilitated by the ESCA and NCD Alliance. And so we are hosting a series of capacity building workshops. And our aim is really to sort of get NGOs and nonprofit organizations sort of up to speed to assist them in being able to do the work that they set out to do. So we have several organizations that are part of our alliance. And of course, we're welcome to having more organizations join us. So feel free to reach out to either myself or Abby Bejo by the end of this call. So we have organizations that are dealing with issues around diabetes, cancer, specifically breast cancer. We have the Renal Society. We have, I don't even want to call everyone because then I'll miss someone. We deal with an organization that's addressing disabilities, LGBTQI issues. So we're really a wide range, and we just really want to push for some change at St. Kitts and Nevis and have the best sort of opportunities that we can for our people. So this afternoon, we have a special guest, Ms. Renee Gumbs, who will be joining us. She's already with us, so I'll introduce her in a second. However, the whole purpose behind Ms. Gumbs in this presentation today is to sort of get us, help us to get a better understanding of what it means to be registered as an NGO. For most of us, the reason we are really interested in this portion is because it would help us be eligible for grant funding, right? So Ms. Gumbs is here, and she is currently the Manager of Registries at the Financial Services Regulatory Commission and the Registrar of NGOs. She has worked in the offshore and financial services sector for over 15 years. She's a certified administrative professional and a chartered secretary. She holds a fellowship designation with the Chartered Governance Institute in the United Kingdom. And she's also a paralegal and a certified anti-money laundering specialist. She's a resident of Bastille and a proud citizen of St. Kitts Nevis. So before I turn over to Ms. Gumbs, let me ask everyone to please mute your mics. Okay, and feel free to utilize the chat. Abby will be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions, you can also raise your hand. So either raise your hand or use the chat. We want it to be interactive. We want to get all our questions out to Ms. Gumbs so that we leave this workshop feeling more knowledgeable and secure about the process. Okay, all right, Ms. Gumbs, thank you for joining us, and I'm turning it over to you.
Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. Before I begin my presentation, I would like to thank Lake Health and Wellbeing Organization for the invitation to share information on the NGO sector with concentration on the process of registering an NGO and post-registration requirements. I wish to thank everyone for attending and participating in this session. In this room with me, I have the Director of the Financial Services Regulatory Commission, Ms. Kirsten Petty, and our Director, Ms. Tevin Coker. We are asking for you to hold all questions until the end of the presentation. Back to the first slide, just a minute. The NGO legislation was enacted in 2008 to establish a legal framework for NGOs and to provide regulation and oversight to the sector. Go back to the next one. Slide 2. My presentation would cover what is an NGO, registering NGOs, vulnerabilities of NGOs, and the role of the FSRC. Actually, the process of the FSRC in the registration of the NGO.
Huh?
What is an NGO? And I'll read from the screen.
So you must pay attention to.
Sorry?
Uh,
An NGO is a non-profit, non-governmental body, organization, or association whose aims, nature, and objectives are primary for the benefit of the public and shall include activities that are patriotic, religious, charitable for scientific inquiry, community development, for sustainable development, human rights, artistic for protection of animals, social, professional, or sporting character, or the like. And this definition was taken from Section 3 of the NGOs Act. Now, what are the benefits to registration of an NGO? There are many benefits to the registration of an NGO, and I'll list 6 of them. First one would be legal recognition. This allows the NGO to operate within the parameters of the law. Of course, access to funding. This enables the NGO to be eligible for government grants, international donor funding, because many funding organizations require NGOs to be registered. There's also the tax benefit of exemption from government taxes that are levied on all entities that carry on business. It shows accountability and transparency. Organizations that operate transparently and shows they maintain financial records. And of course, the legal protection, the protection that shields its members and leadership from the organization's actions and debts. And this is very important. And of course, you have networking opportunities, which opens up opportunities for collaboration, networking, and partnership with like-minded organizations. Characteristics and attributes of an NGO. Of course, an NGO must be independent of government control or any organ of the state and management. The NGO must not be seen as a profit-making organization, but solely for charitable purposes. It must have a governing constitution which sets out how the NGO will be governed. And this is important, and we'll explore more about the constitution later on. Another one of the characteristics is the NGO will achieve exempt status upon application to the Ministry of Finance. Although every business in St. Kitts is required to have a business license, the tax status would be exempted. And that's one of the characteristics of the NGO. Next slide. Here we have a classification of the NGOs that we currently have on our register. And we have NGOs registered that have been classified for human rights, religious. This is mostly church organizations, animal protection. We have BAC, I think another one. We have sporting NGOs, community-based NGOs, NGOs for sustainable development, for scientific, patriotic, charitable. We have a number of educational NGOs and other NGOs that have been classified otherwise, and of course, associations. Slide. Registration and reporting requirements that are listed in the NGO Act under Section 6. First one, we have the cost. The cost of the registration is very minimal. It's only $150 EC. And every year you file an annual statement and you pay $20 to file that statement. On the application form, we have a one-sheet application form, which requires you to provide a brief statement of the details and aims and objectives and purposes of the NGO. You must present identification particulars of all persons who are involved in the NGO, a copy of your constitution, memorandum, and articles of association, and this is in regards to a company or an NGO that would have had its own constitution, a copy of your bylaws, copy which lays out your organization structure, and of course, identification of persons involved in the NGO. And identification would be a primary ID and a secondary ID. The primary ID could be a copy of your passport, and the secondary ID could be a voter's ID or maybe social security ID. So you bring those IDs to the office and we will certify them. If you take them to a notary, of course you pay for that, but if you bring them straight to our office, there's no cost. We will just certify your information and give it back to you right away. Here's the application form that I spoke about earlier. Name of the applicant would be the name of the NGO that you propose to register. You must have an address where the NGO could be, where documentation or notices could be sent. And that information would normally be the telephone number where you can reach the office, email address, of course, the name of the proposed NGO, the proposed address of the NGO, and you attach the following documents, which are your constitution and memorandum of articles of association of a company limited by guarantee or non-profit company, or certificate or letter of establishment with your bylaws of the organization. Now let's break that down a little bit. The constitution and memorandum and articles of association, this is in relation to company and that has been registered prior. The non-profit company is a company that is set up in Nevis or is incorporated in Nevis. A letter of establishment is something that is usually given, I think, at the social development, social office, where you have been maybe a social group and you would have gotten maybe a letter or a certificate and a copy of your bylaws. Now, for those organizations that don't have a constitution and you seek to develop your own constitution, if you go to the Companies Act, you can use the Constitution as a guide. in terms of what is expected to be in that document. If you don't know where to begin, you can start there. It's at the standard, it's an international standard, it's called Table B, and it's an international standard. Along with that, you submit your statement and details and the objectives of the NGO. You present a copy of your organization structure. This is basically the outline of the persons who are involved in your NGO. And then names and address, occupation, and the 2 forms of identification. And of course, the person who may be president or so forth could sign on behalf of the company, of the NGO, saying that the information that they have presented is true to the best of their knowledge. So sign this and you present it to our office with a fee of $150 EC. Let's look at the Constitution a little closely. I have picked out a couple of the items or headings that the Constitution really should have in, which would be your purpose and objectives, a list of your membership, who your members are, how long they will hold office, the election of members, how that goes, how long they will be in office, how do you elect them, who can vote, duties of the officers, which would be maybe your secretary, treasurer, etc. And of course, your quorum, what constitutes a quorum, how often do you take minutes, who keeps the minutes, voting, and notice for meetings. And as I indicated before, this is just a few of the items. Remember, your constitution is your constitution. And these are just guides to assist you. Now, if you are a company limited by guarantee, or a non-profit company, you would have presented your memorandum and articles of association. So that is your constitution. So you use that as your constitution to present to be registered as an NGO. And then we just have another slide showing your organization structure. And this is something that you present with the documents for registration. And we have here, of course, the chairperson may be at the top. You have your board of directors. You have your managing directors, your treasurer, your secretary, and your public relations officer. When some NGOs are just newly incorporated, sometimes they don't have all these positions filled, but you know for sure you need a treasurer, a secretary, and managing directors. Next slide. Annual reporting requirements. Now, the NGO Act has selected a month for submission, and I think this is very good because as a non-profit company or guarantee company, your filing is when you would have incorporated. But for NGOs, it's every September. So the NGOs can say, we forgot to file. It's every September, every year. By the 30th of September, each year, as an NGO, you must file your statement of accounts. And this is in relation to accounts, which shows you how your business is operated, and these are audited statements. You file your certified copy of the financial statements, would be your balance sheet, a report outlining your program of activities and policies. And this is important because as an NGO, you claim to be an NGO, you must have for the year your program of activities that you plan to accomplish for that period. So we need to see that. And failure to comply with the filing of the 3 documents above could or may result in the cancellation of your registration and the loss of your tax exemption privileges. Here we have the form. It's pretty simple. Particulars of the NGO, which is the name, telephone number, email address, address of the registered office, date of incorporation, the NGO number that we would have given you when you would have registered, a list of your executive, and you attach a certified copy of your financial statement and a report dealing generally with the program and activities, policies for the NGO during the financial year. And as stated above, the annual statement must be audited, but I should interject here and say that currently we are in dialogue with some of the NGOs that we have registered with us, and they have indicated that the provision to supply or present audited statements is very onerous and really seeps into the funds of the NGO. So that is not the intention of the FSRC to, cripple the institution, but rather to assist. Even though the provision right now is to present these documents, we are currently working on some new regulations to assist the NGO to present an unaudited financial statement. Right, 12. Gonna be reading these. 1 minute, please. Now we have some vulnerabilities of an NGO. Persons may not feel that an NGO is vulnerable, but NGO is vulnerable, and we have listed 5 areas in which they are vulnerable. The NGO is highly trusted by the public, and therefore it can be used as an attractive vehicle for criminals to carry out their activities. They are relatively easy to set up, as the registration process is not difficult. NGOs have a global presence, which includes branches or offices in high-risk countries with weak AML, CFT, which is anti-money laundering, countering the financing of terrorism regimes, allowing frequent movements of money, goods, or people throughout areas without proper monitoring and screening. NGOs often have complex financial operations, which includes donations and investments involving high volume of cash in multiple currencies. And NGOs can be used as possible networking, bringing people together for a common goal, but it also creates a platform for terrorists or terrorist activities. When persons hear these words, terrorists and terrorist activities, we often say we are a small jurisdiction and we don't have any terrorist operations here, but we are a small nation. We have a seat at the table, and these requirements are global requirements, and they also apply to us in terms of terrorists, terrorist group, and terrorist operations. So even though we are small, we don't know where funding might be going to other jurisdictions where there are weak AML CFT legislation. How an NGO is abused. An NGO may be established primarily for criminal purposes. It may seek to collect donations to support terrorist purposes or unlawful activity. Recipients of donations might misuse the funds if proper due diligence checks are not conducted, and the use of assets such as vehicles to transport persons, cash, and weapons. So in order to prevent the misuse of NGOs and maintain transparency and integrity in the sector, we must implement, or the NGO must implement, control mechanisms to prevent the abuse of the organization. Next slide, please. How to prevent the abuse of the NGO? In order to build and maintain transparency and integrity of the NGO sector, we must implement control mechanisms and practices to prevent the sector from being used for illegal purposes. So we have outreach and education, and we're happy for this outreach and the education moment to share this information with you. We must have proper supervision and monitoring, and that's where the financial services comes in. Investigating and information gathering and international cooperation, and all of these work together to prevent or help to prevent the abuse of the NGO. There should be full engagement with the NGO sector with respect to money laundering and terrorist financing risk, and regulations and guidelines should be followed to mitigate these risks. Proper documentation and registration of NGOs are important in deciphering legitimate from bogus. All major donors, trustees, and beneficial owners should be known and identified. Fit and proper tests should be conducted on these persons before they are allowed to associate themselves with the NGO. Funds should always be kept in bank accounts, and formal financial channels should be used to transfer money. Financial institutions should work with the FIU and other authorities to continually monitor the transactions of the NGO in an effort to detect and report suspicious activities. The NGO should maintain at least 5 years record of international transactions with adequate details to verify that funds are being collected and spent according to the purposes and objectives of the NGO. So we see the reporting requirement to keep records for at least 5 years. There should be effective mechanism in place to ensure that there is cooperation, coordination, and information sharing among all authorities. The role of the FSRC. Now, if you go to the NGO legislation, you will notice that there's a section that outlines the role of the FSRC. And the role of the FSRC is basically supervisory powers as the ultimate regulatory body for financial services and for anti-terrorism activities within St. Christopher and Nevis. We monitor compliance of regulated persons with the Anti-Terrorism Act and regulations. We examine the affairs of the business, assisting in investigation and cooperation with FIU and the White Collar Crime Unit. Now, I should explain that upon registration, after you would have been registered as an NGO, there's a requirement for you to be examined, or the affairs of the NGO to be examined by the FSRC inspectors. Now, this examination is not an anti-money laundering examination. It would basically be based on the Anti-Terrorism Act and regulations. The intention is not to cripple the NGO or to stifle or to prevent the continued business of the operations, but it's really a monitoring aspect to ensure that the objectives of the NGOs are actually being carried out. So this is the role of the FSRC as it relates to oversight and monitoring of the NGO. We've come to the end of my presentation, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Gumbs. That was very insightful. If you'd like to raise your hand in the chat, or Abby, I don't know if there are some, I think there are a couple of questions in the chat itself.
Yes, yeah. So we had a first question, and so this is from Mr. Mills at the Association, the St. Kitts Nevis Association of Persons Living with Disabilities. And so his question was, where is your office located, and is it accessible? Is it wheelchair accessible? Sorry, let me just find the exact phrase of the question. So it was, where is your office located, and is it wheelchair accessible?
Okay, we are located at South Independence Square Street in the old Clico building, and we are wheelchair accessible.
Okay, thank you so much. Then we had another question, which is, what's the difference between registering as a community organization and as an NGO?
A community organization, as I know it, is not, there's no legal framework. The NGO legislation is the legal framework that has been introduced to supervise, to govern, to regulate this type of business. That's just, to me, it's a registration as a group, but this legislation, the NGO Act, was introduced basically to cover these type of organization and to give you that type of protection, stability under this legislation.
Wonderful.
Additionally, to answer that, as Ms. Gumbs mentioned during her presentation, funders generally would ask for you to be registered with your with the body relevant to your country, which is
Yes.
the FSRC in our case.
Yes.
So becoming an NGO, Ms. Melissa, would make you put you in a better position to get grant funding.
Yes.
Great. So we have another question from Alessandra. Sorry, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Alessandra Paulo. So she would like to ask her question. Go ahead.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you for very informative session today. I'm currently actually registering my NGO, but I had a couple of questions regarding this. So according to the lawyer who is assisting me, I was told I had to open first a business and then convert this into an NGO, as there was no other way around this. And is this still the case?
Okay, you said you had to register a business. Now, the FSRC, we do not register businesses. We deal with the incorporation of companies. So I'm thinking you're referring to the incorporation of a company.
Yes.
I believe the advice you have been given is good, because it means that you would start from the incorporation of a company which is limited by guarantee, which will give you the legal personality and protection for your members and anyone involved in your company. So you register a company that is limited by guarantee, and once you would have received your certificate, your constitution, your memorandum of association, you then apply to be an NGO. So that information is correct.
Okay, thank you.
So-
Oh, sorry, just to follow up on this, because the second part of my question was concerning the bylaws, and that's the other information I was given. I was told I should also strictly include bylaws of my new NGO.
Your bylaws is if you have them.
Okay.
If you have them, you present them. If you don't have them, you don't have them. But the requirement, really the strict requirement, is that you must have a constitution.
Yes.
Which is out how you operate. Some NGOs don't have bylaws.
Can they be added later on?
They can be added later, yes.
Okay. And also in the first year, is it then possible to also make other changes, such as changing of the director, the managing director, within the first year?
Of course, nothing is written in stone. The operations evolve. People leave organizations every day. Your secretary changes tomorrow. You no longer have your treasurer. You know, there's the option to make those changes as you go along.
Okay.
Of course, there's a fee to make those changes. So we encourage you to ensure that those persons who decide to give up their time, effort, their knowledge, expertise to your organization, that they at least plan to stay with you for at least a year.
Okay, sure. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Gumbs, I just wanted to clarify, sorry. So a business license is a requirement prior to registering with your organization?
No, it's not a requirement, but I think I mentioned business license because once you're operating in St. Kitts, you're required to get a license. But if you're an NGO, it should be stamped. It should be stamped exempted.
Okay.
So you have an NGO and you're involved in some kind of business activity, and once you would have been registered with us, that information goes out to Inland Revenue. But however, they will know that you are an NGO. So when you begin to start your business and you realize that you're involved in activity that will require you to pay taxes on something, then you apply for the exempt stamp, your documents to be exempted. But it's not a requirement for you first to get a business license to start your NGO.
Thank you for that.
I don't know if it's clear.
Sorry.
Hello?
What did you-
Yes.
So there's no requirement for you to go ahead and just go and get a business license before you register your NGO.
Okay, someone said it's not clear to them, so I don't know.
Say it again.
Yeah, if you might say it, explain it again.
The license, the business license is only applicable if you, the NGO, are about to get into business activity. There's no requirement from our end. So you form your NGO and you're only required to get a business license if you intend to get into some form of business activity.
I don't know if this helps, but we're registered as a company limited by guarantee, and we're also registered as an NGO. Because we're registered as a company limited by guarantee, we do have to get a business license, but we don't pay, you know, like we're exempted from paying taxes. So I don't know if that helps clear anything up.
Exactly. So that person would have incorporated a company, and they would have become involved in some form of business activity. And once you would have begin to get involved in, because the environment and the law is that if you're gonna get involved with this, you should get a license. But what we are saying is that you would be exempt from paying taxes. So you apply for the license. The license would be stamped exempted from taxes. But you must register and you must apply for the license if you're going to do business.
Great. I hope that was clear now. Thank you. So the questions are coming in thick and fast now. So, all right. So I think there's just still confusion around. So someone's asking, does an NGO have to be incorporated before registering as an NGO? Is having a legal personality required?
The provision, if you go back to the provision, is to have your memorandum, a constitution. So let's say you are a community-based group and you want to register as an NGO. You must have your constitution or memorandum of association. And these are things that you would have to put together. If you are already a company, you would have had your constitution and memorandum of association. So you don't necessarily have to come from that aspect. But like I said prior, the strength really is in the company aspect. So if you come from a company and you have that legal personality, it's always best to move from that angle and then to an NGO. But then you can also move straight to an NGO by just coming as a community-based group with your registration, with your constitution, bylaws if you have them, and register with us.
Wonderful, thank you. So we have Dwayne Archibald would like to ask a question. Go ahead, Dwayne.
Hi, good night. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
loud
I
and
can.
clear.
Okay, great. Ms. Gumbs, thank you for the information that you just presented to us. It's very helpful. Now,
Yeah.
my question is, in my organization, there's still a debate whether we should be an NGO or not, because as everything in life, it has its pros and cons.
Yes.
One of the issues one of the queries that we had was that our organization does survive off of donations, and sometimes these donations come from overseas, like in the UK and the US. Is there the advantage to being exempted from any taxes coming from these places, these donations that coming from these places?
The advantage from receiving the donations? Is that the question?
No, the question is that are we exempted from the taxes that come with these donations from places like the UK and the US?
You see, you have to be an NGO to be exempted.
That's what I'm asking. If we have
Yes,
to be,
yes. There's no other way around it. If you are, okay, you said you have a company. And if your company is a company limited by guarantee, which is mean to say, you could call it not for profit. And then you have your NGO registration. There's no other way you can be exempted from any form of tax unless you're an NGO. And if you go to the company's legislation or any other legislation that governs entity formation or anything like that, the only type of organizations that are exempted from any form of taxes are NGOs.
all right, great. So then this comes to the the big hurdle that I described before of being audited, because the auditors cost money and it's a long, tedious process. And I recognize that there is a time limit given for annual provision of our finances. And I'm assuming that the auditing has to be included in that. And that's, to me, that's impossible, because again, I could say straight out, it's the Rotary Club I'm representing, and we all have different lives. We all have different businesses, and frankly, it's impossible to do such a tedious task in such a short period of time.
We've heard the cries of the NGOs, and we sympathize, we understand, you know, and I don't know if you joined the session late, but I did mention that we have sent some new regulations to be approved for a small change to be made to the requirement for the filing of the audited financial statements. And we are requesting that NGOs are allowed to file unaudited statements. So if you have your statements, maybe your bank statements or your records, anything, we would accept that. And we are hoping that those requirements will be approved soonest, because we realize that the requirement is onerous, and we definitely don't want to be, we want the NGO sector to be compliant. We want everybody to be compliant, and we've realized that this provision is you know, really harsh, and we want to minimize the provision, and we want to also keep all NGOs going. So we're hoping that we should get those changes done in a short time.
Are we privy to those changes right now?
Not at the moment, no.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Wonderful, thank you. So we have a few more questions. So Jasmine Brown and then Anthony Mills, and then we have some in the chat as well.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Ms. Gumbs, for the information you shared. I have two questions. Number one, I think they're both easy, I guess. When you're doing the renewal, the annual renewal,
Yes.
is there any additional charges if you want to change directors or anything like that, other than the $20 renewal fee?
Currently, there are no additional fees other than the $20 for
Okay,
the
so you can make amendment when it's time to renew in September.
for the NGO, yes. But if you are a company, you'll have to, and you're making some changes to your company information, there's a charge. But in relation to the NGO, there's no charge.
Okay, second question. We're registered as an NGO, period. However, if we're in the process of doing fundraisers, or having events that is going to generate income, do we have to register as a company for that, or our NGO status will cover that?
No, you don't have to register as a company for that.
Okay, so we can have a food sale for the NGO without worrying about
Exactly. Your operations is to raise funds.
okay, yes.
Yeah, but we do have for monitoring though, we do have a form that we require NGOs to fill out, and that is to help us to assess the risk to the sector in terms of funding, where you get your funding, how much it is. And this is just something that we issue to the NGOs. We're going to start that maybe, at least once a year. You could let us know if you have bank accounts. We don't ask you how much is in the bank. We just give you some range between A and B, where you get your funding. And this is just to help us to assess the risk to the jurisdiction.
Okay, I'm sorry, I have an additional question. So when you mention doing business,
yes,
what is the definition then of an NGO doing business that would require us to have a business license or corporate license?
well, it involves your day-to-day activities. For example, let's say you, for a business license, you have a business, you open a restaurant and you begin your operations. You know for sure you need a license. You have an NGO and you have your day-to-day operations. Your operations might be, let's say you're into bringing wheelchairs for persons, and you have you begin your operations. That is where for sure you definitely would have to get a license, a business license. Of course, you would be exempted, so there's no issue with that. But every business, I guess, let's put it this way, it's the law. Once you're gonna start a business, once you're gonna start operations, you gotta get a business license.
Okay, so it's not the occasional fundraisers you're talking about. It's basically having a continuous transactional kind of relationship with the public on a regular basis.
Yes, because that is what you do. You solicit funds, you raise funds basically for your operation, So that would not require the licensing aspect.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Wonderful. So we have Mr. Mills has a question.
No, just some clarification I wanted. She said on a couple of occasions that you have to register as a NGO to have tax exempt status. So, but our organization is registered as a community-based organization. So I just wanted to clarify the tax exempt status between the two of them, and if a community-based organization is required to pay tax in any way.
Could you repeat the last part of your question?
If a community-based organization is required to pay tax in any form, I just wanted to get some clarification.
Well, the tax provision would come in as if you are doing business with the Inland Revenue Department.
Oh, okay. We're trying to clarify because you keep specifying that you have to be registered as an NGO to get tax exempt. So was just some clarification I needed.
Your community-based operation, for you to get that exemption, of course, an application would have been had to send to the Ministry of Finance. And the thing is that there are instances where you very well may be allowed to get the exemption. But however, for a wider scope, or for not just saying, okay, I could get a tax exemption, but for other things, or for other reasons, for international funding, for other reasons, for protection, for other things that may not very well be included, that you would readily receive from being a community-based organization, is lacking. We are encouraging persons to come into the fold, where you will have more opportunities and more protection.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Gumbs, so much for your patience and for answering all these questions. We do have a few more. I hope you're okay to take a few more questions. Are you okay to take a few more questions? It's like you're on the hot seat. So we'll wrap up soon, though. We'll wrap up soon. The questions, a few more questions. I think it's just truly trying to clarify the liability. So one question is, if you apply to be an NGO without first incorporating as a business, is the executive open to a liability?
Could you repeat again for me, please?
If you apply to be an NGO without first incorporating as a business, is the executive open to liability?
Of course you are.
Okay.
There's no legal protection. There's no protection. A company has the protection of the members in the organization. Suppose somebody in your organization just decided to do something, and set the whole organization, aflame, to use a colloquial term. Who is liable? Liability would be the persons involved. So without that legal protection, the members would be liable.
Okay, I hope that's answered the person's question. And then I think we just have I think it's just two more now. So
that, sorry to cut you off.
Okay.
But just say that a company, which is a guarantee company that we register here, is a legal person. And when I say legal person, I mean it has the I don't want to say personality, but it has the personality of an individual, which means that you can sue, be sued, travel, move, change whatever it is you want to do. Tomorrow you're in the business of setting up churches, or tomorrow we decide, okay, we want to be involved in bringing in wheelchairs, or we want to be involved in some other aspects, some other community aspect. That legal person has the right to do so and has the protection. And just to say that if you have a lot more questions, you can always call me at the FSRC. I can give my information in terms of emails. I will try to answer every single last one of them to the best of my ability.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So two more. So one is related to financial statements. The person asked, does all the money raised or donated have to appear also on a bank statement, or can I simply state it when filing in a form? So I think that's related to, when you have to give your financial accounts every year.
That's a ticklish question. And I would say that's where the FSRC comes in, because as I mentioned, that the NGO is subjected to an examination by the inspectors at the FSRC. And the examiners would definitely look at your bank statement, your financial statements, and to ensure that you are reporting correctly.
Okay.
So the best good thing would be to submit, be honest what you're doing and submit, because we don't have a standard reporting form, right? So you attach them and report all your, all your information. Our intention is not to close down your NGO or to be onerous and put any additional hardship on your organization, but just really to ensure that you comply with the provisions, you do not pose any risk to the jurisdiction, and that kind of thing.
Wonderful, thank you. So hopefully that answered your question, Alessandra. And then final question will be from Mr. Mills. Over to you, Mr. Mills.
That question is the same question I asked.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Wonderful. Okay, so I think we have exhausted all the questions, and we appreciate Ms. Gumbs for her patience and her time. So I'm going to hand back over to Teresia to close us out with vote of thanks and wrap up. Over to you, Teresia.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Gumbs, for taking the time out to address these important questions that we had. Thank you as well to our participants. You asked some great questions, and I hope that we're leaving with more clarity. Ms. Gumbs, we look forward to working with you and your team. I did have, sorry, it is a question. Is there a list of can you obtain a list of NGOs from your organization? So that if you wanted to
a list that is readily available, but we can make that available for you. Then you have to make the request.
Okay, sorry, that just came to me. Okay, so thank you again. Thank you to our participants. Was there anything else you wanted to close out and say, Abby, or well, before Abby? So guys, thank you for joining us. And we my toddler's home. We plan to continue these capacity building seminars or webinars. So be sure to keep an eye out for our upcoming webinars. So Abby, if there's anything that you wanted to mention, or Ms. Gumbs, if there was anything that you wanted to say, let me know.
Just to say that my contact information is on the screen right now. So anybody who would want to send me an email, it's renee.gumbs@fsrc.kn. And of course, I will answer your email.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay, yeah, just to echo Terry, to say thank you so much, Ms. Gumbs, for your time. Thank you so much to the FSRC also for providing us with the opportunity to learn more about the NGO registration process. And thank you to your administrative team for facilitating and being so helpful in terms of providing all the information and all the logistics. So thank you, everyone. So I think that's it. So everyone have a great evening. And we look forward to seeing you all at the next capacity building session. So thank you so much. And just to say, Ms. Gumbs, people are saying in the chat, thank you very much. It was very helpful.
And lastly, the feedback form.
Yes.
It will self-generate at the end of the meeting. So please assist us by completing the form. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night, everyone.
Have a great evening.